On May the 26th, the US Senate passed a bill requiring the Director of National Intelligence to declassify information on the origins of COVID-19.
Today, the President asked the intelligence community to redouble their efforts to collect and analyze information that could bring us closer to a definitive conclusion and to a report back to him in 90 days.
The honest answer today is that we cannot offer a definitive conclusion about whether, this originated in a lab accident or whether it originated in a natural transmission from infected animals to human beings.
In the pandemic's early days, some US politicians had already begun promoting a conspiracy theory. A possible laboratory spillover from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Although most infectious disease specialists refuted this theory, it didn't prevent the story from spreading from anti-China hardliners in Congress to the US State Department and then to the Oval Office.
No, we're going to see where it is. We're going to see where it comes from. And, look, you know every theory. There's a lot of theories. But, yeah, we have people looking at it very, very strongly. Scientific people, intelligence people, and others.
And what gives
and we're going to put it all together, and I think we're going to have a very good answer eventually.
The report was made public on Friday, August 27th. The intelligence investigation of the origins of the coronavirus is inconclusive. The world still hasn't seen the alleged so-called evidence. This leaves many unanswered questions. When did the virus first emerge in America, for example? How are politics affecting pandemic management in a nation with more than 38 million cases and more than 630,000 deaths? The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention confirmed the first case of COVID-19 on these shores on January the 21st, 2020, in the US state of Washington. The first death reportedly occurred outside of Seattle on February the 29th. But is it correct? California public health officials discovered a California patient died from COVID-19 more than 3 weeks earlier on February the 6th. After studying the autopsy of America's new patient zero, an American pathologist concluded that the cause of death was a ruptured heart due to COVID-19.
The virus has entered the bloodstream and has circulated and damaged the heart muscle directly.
The same discrepancy appears to have occurred in Florida. A Miami Herald investigation concluded the spread of COVID-19 in Florida likely began in January, if not earlier. When 67-year-old Tyus Tepper developed COVID-like symptoms in late January last year, COVID-19 tests were not yet available in her county.
I got sick on the 22nd of January, and it started with a headache, a very strange headache.
3 months later, in April, she tested positive for long-term antibodies to COVID-19. Tepper took a second antibody test a month later. It too was positive. Other Florida newspapers reported the same story, deepening Tepper's suspicions. Florida public health officials said it cannot be determined definitively if these early symptoms were a result of COVID-19 or other causes. But there were other suspected cases too, in another state, that could push the timeline back even further to November 2019. Michael Milham, the mayor of Belleville in New Jersey, believes he was first infected as far back as November 2019, more than a month before China reported its first case.
I had no idea originally what it was. I had all the symptoms initially, sore throat, a little bit of a high fever. I was definitely here in the States, there's no doubt about that. And I was at a conference in November. There were a lot of people there. And that's almost positive where I believe I initially contracted it.
Like Tyus Tepper in Florida, Melham tested positive for COVID-19 antibodies, clinical evidence of a prior infection. The National Institutes of Health published evidence in November 2020 that COVID-19 had been circulating in 5 US states as early as December 2019. Research from other countries may be pushing the pandemic's timeline back a lot further too. A research team from the University of Barcelona in Spain detected the coronavirus in wastewater samples collected in March 2019. This was 9 months before a hospital in Hubei province reported cases of unknown pneumonia to the Wuhan Center for Disease Control and Prevention. How easy is it to spread a virus? According to the United Nations and World Bank data, around 2.3 billion people travelled internationally in 2019. That's roughly a third of the world's population. Each globetrotter a potential host.
When it was announced to the world that there was a severe acute respiratory infection circulating, boom, that's bad news. Already it means it's airborne.
Now consider the ease of modern travel. The longest commercial flight this year is New York City to Singapore. An infected person could make this 15,300 kilometre trip in just 18 hours.
We don't have a clue right now which part of the world it's going to come from, what kind of virus it's going to be. As we've experienced with COVID-19, respiratory viruses are the worst in terms of being able to move quickly around the globe now that we're so interconnected.
Technology has shrunk the world. Social media and mobile technologies have also made it possible for conspiracy theories to spread faster than a coronavirus. It wasn't that long ago that much of the world dismissed the lab leak scenario as China bashing by members of the US Congress. 27 scientists from around the world published a statement in the British medical journal The Lancet stating, "We stand together to strongly condemn conspiracy theories suggesting that COVID-19 does not have a natural origin."
And when it came to the lab leak hypothesis, we just didn't see significant information that suggests that happened. I mean, as a scientist, you can only deal with the evidence that you see in front of your eyes. And if it's not there, then you can only come to the conclusion that it's extremely unlikely, which is, by the way, a unanimous conclusion.
On August 17th, research signed by 21 scientists from around the world reached a similar conclusion. As for the vast majority of human viruses, the most parsimonious explanation for the origins of SARS-CoV-2 is a zoonotic event. There is currently no evidence that SARS-CoV-2 has a laboratory origin. Back in April 2020, the Office of the Acting Director of National Intelligence said, "The intelligence community also concurs with the wide scientific consensus that the COVID-19 virus was not man-made or genetically modified." Later that same day,
and my question is, have you seen anything at this point that gives you a high degree of confidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the origin of this virus?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
the Trump administration continued to dispute their findings and doubled down. The Daily Telegraph, an Australian newspaper owned by then Trump supporter Rupert Murdoch, claimed to have an intelligence dossier that backed the White House. Sherry Markson claimed the 15-page research document had been prepared by the Five Eyes intelligence agencies of the United States, Australia, New Zealand, Canada and the United Kingdom. More than a year later, the Sydney Morning Herald reported Markson's so-called dossier was in fact a background document prepared by the US State Department. The dossier also failed to persuade scientists. The vast majority still say the most likely origin is wildlife, not a lab. Dr. Robert Gary is a world-renowned virologist who has published nearly 250 scientific papers.
This is not a bioweapon. Nobody made this virus in a laboratory. This is a product of nature. What we believe is that the virus, probably a long time ago, originated from a bat species because there are coronaviruses of bats that are very similar to this new coronavirus, the SARS coronavirus 2. But there are other parts of the virus that look more like other animal coronaviruses. So what we believe is that this is a recombinant. So the virus combined from two different species to create a virus that is now infecting humans.
Gary's opinion remains the scientific consensus.
The virus that causes SARS-CoV-2 is clearly has a close relative in bats. There's no reason to think that it's a deliberately engineered weapon or something like that.
There's no proof. I mean, you can say, yeah, you can point to the Wuhan and say it's theirs, but no one said, yeah, we caught you.
We all know that the last president, blame on the Chinese people, but I don't think that's fair.
I don't think it's a good thing to blame China for the virus without substantial proof that it actually came from there.
We don't really know. The scientific evidence, as I see right now, is not there.
We are at a time where we need to be trusting science and having those members of our community come forward and assist us.
It's been politicized from day one. They're using it to divide the country, keep us in fear. This has been the most divisive situation that this country's been in over 100 years.
On May 23rd, 3 days before Biden ordered a US intelligence review of COVID-19's origins, the Wall Street Journal reported researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology got sick in November 2019, with, quote, symptoms consistent with both COVID-19 and common seasonal illness. Was it COVID-19 or a common seasonal illness, like a cold or the flu? Previously undisclosed intelligence didn't specify which. The earliest known cases in Wuhan were linked to a pneumonia of an unknown cause. Pneumonia is not a common seasonal illness. The World Health Organization was getting ready to hold its annual meeting, where it would discuss its ongoing inquiry into the pandemic's origins. Does timing reveal anything about motives? Consider these dates. In April and March, President Biden had proposed a $4.1 trillion economic plan to improve America's education, social programs, job creation and infrastructure. On May 26th, he ordered the intelligence review of COVID-19 origins. On August 10th, the US Senate passed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill by a rare bipartisan supermajority of 69 votes to 30.
The bill, as amended, is passed.
Politics is often called the art of compromise. Was Biden's intelligence review a concession to win bipartisan support for his economic agenda?
China has an overall goal, and I don't criticize them for the goal, but they have an overall goal to become the leading country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world, and the most powerful country in the world. That's not going to happen on my watch.
In a statement, China opposes the report on COVID-19 origins by the US intelligence community. The origin tracing is a matter of science. It can only be left to scientists. There is a history of US intelligence reports. In 2012, Foreign Policy magazine listed the 10 biggest American intelligence failures. Among them, of course, the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion into Cuba, the 1968 Tet Offensive into Vietnam, the 9/11 attacks were also obviously a big miss, and the 2003 Iraq War, its rationale, Iraq's alleged development of weapons of mass destruction. Some intelligence reports are fatally flawed, some are inconclusive. Putting an Asian face on the pandemic has led to violence. Artist Kate Bay didn't see it coming. Walking to work not far from New York's Times Square, a stranger punched her in the face.
Our eyes met very briefly, and then He just punched me on my face.
Her face, the likely reason she was attacked.
I think it is just being an Asian, yeah. Because they would always say like, I am the coronavirus, I'm causing it, this pandemic.
Bei, a Korean American, could have been mistaken for Chinese. Did that make her a target based on a particular brand of American politics? Roughly 9 months after the assault on Bei, this.
There are fears this morning that a string of deadly shootings at massage parlors in the Atlanta area could be linked to a wave of attacks against Asian Americans.
Authorities have not ruled out whether the crimes were racially motivated, but the shooter has denied race being a factor.
Whether it's explicitly called a hate incident is irrelevant. 6 of the 8 people murdered were Asian American. 7 of 8 were women. This man targeted places where Asian Americans were working.
Between May 2020 and May 2021, hate crimes against Asians in the 16 largest US cities and counties rose 164%.
It is not.
There's also been hostility against scientists.
Here, Senator, it is you.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement.
You're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
The political virus arguably made it difficult to contain the coronavirus. On August 16th, the New York Times reported the US was averaging more than 141,000 new cases a day, an increase of 64% over the previous 2 weeks. If you go back to July 1st and look at weekly numbers instead of daily CDC data, it shows the US case count has skyrocketed 700%. The intelligence review made Fauci a target once more.
So if you are trying to, get at me as a public health official and a scientist, you're really attacking not only Dr. Anthony Fauci, you're attacking science.
As Dr. Fauci is the most recognizable face in the fight against COVID in the US, in China, Dr. Shi Zhengli is an iconic scientist. She discovered the source of the 2002 SARS pandemic in the city of Foshan, southern China. And on December 30th, 2019, she and her team examined the first samples of the coronavirus.
同时呢，我们也对这个样本进行高通量测序，以及病原的分离。那么我们在很短的时间内，就首先就确定了这些样本里边有新型的冠状病毒的感染，那么也获得了它的全基因组序列，那么证明这个病原和已有的我们已知的病毒的序列都不一样，所以我们当时把它命名为新型冠状病毒。
Earlier this year, Dr. Shi Zhengli published in an article in Science citing documentary SARS-CoV-2 spillover events elsewhere in the world. Minks, the animal raised for fur coats, have been infected by the coronavirus. The World Organization for Animal Health has reported more than 350 outbreaks in the Netherlands, Denmark, Spain, France, Sweden, Italy and Greece, and across the Atlantic in the United States. Did these European and US minks catch COVID from people? Or was it the other way round? In China, Xi told Science that several small-scale COVID-19 outbreaks were traced to virus-contaminated uncooked seafood or pork shipped from overseas. It was found that the viral genome signatures in these outbreaks were different from the viral strains present in China. Where did these strains originate? ProPublica, one of the most highly regarded investigative newsrooms in the world, reports 6 University of North Carolina researchers were under medical surveillance because of possible exposures to, quote, lab-created coronaviruses. In a statement sent to ProPublica, the university said, "It is because of our early work that the United States was in a position to quickly find the first successful treatment for SARS-CoV-2. The incident has prompted Chinese officials to ask for an investigation on Fort Detrick, a US Army lab in the state of Maryland that works with dangerous pathogens.
彻底调查德堡及200多个美国海外生物实验基地种种疑云， 给世界人民和国际社会一个交代。
In August, the Chinese envoy to the UN in Geneva sent a formal request to the head of the WHO requesting full access to the labs at Fort Detrick and the University of North Carolina. The envoy also presented the results of an online petition demanding an investigation into Fort Detrick, signed by more than 25 million Chinese citizens. Fort Detrick has yet to respond to our interview request. After doctors in San Diego County reported 2 children infected with a novel swine flu, some scientists thought the 2009 pandemic began in Southern California. It took another 7 years before science traced the outbreak to pigs in central Mexico. Because good science can take a long time to find answers, Deborah Seligson, former Environment, Science, Technology and Health Counselor to the US Embassy in Beijing, thinks politicizing the issues of origins is counterproductive.
And we really need to be working with China right now. We need to be working together to vaccinate the world, and we need to be working together to monitor and prepare for and try to prevent the next pandemic, because this isn't the last pandemic that we're going to face.
There have been scientific relations with the entire world and China since the 1970s. It's just now that things are getting even more complicated.
With the pandemic, many challenges are still unsolved. Qin Gang, China's new ambassador to the US, is calling for cooperation instead of conflict.
I firmly believe that the door of China-US relations, which is already open, cannot and should not be closed. Endeavor to bring China-US relations on the right track.
A goal that is shared by scientists worried about the future.
It will always be the case that prevention is cheaper than allowing a disease to happen, because the cost of disease is not just the disease itself, it's the impact that it has on economics, on politics, on human dread. So yeah, prevention is the cure. It is the only cure, and we do have to work together as a global community.
In a statement, the Chinese embassy in the US says that its position on the global origin and tracing is consistent. They are against political manipulation, presumption of guilt, and putting the blame on others. China is also asking for a study to be conducted in multiple countries to find the truth